It was early evening of August 31st, 2012, when Yancey Knoll left work and headed home. He started driving his battered old Subaru up Interstate 5. At some point, he encountered a man in a BMW. He had no way of knowing that he was going to be dead in 10 minutes.
Yancey Knoll was just a guy who lived in North Seattle, had a girlfriend and a dog, liked to climb mountains. He was one of us.
When you prosecute murder cases for as long as we have, the random nature of death is what gets in your head.
He was my best friend for 22 years. He was my touchstone. He was the guy who kept me grounded.
People adored him. The last few moments of Yancey Knoll's life were pulling up at a stoplight. The BMW pulled up next to Yancey's Subaru. Yancey turned and saw this car and this man next to him. He saw the gun pointed at his head, and he saw the bullet that shattered the window and tore apart his face. And then he turned and was shot 3 more times in the head.
The witnesses really didn't know what had happened. They heard the shots, and then they saw the BMW pull into oncoming traffic, screeched out, leaving tire marks, going so fast that when the car hit a hill, it took air and then sped out of sight.
When I arrived that day at the murder scene, it was dusk. They had yellow crime scene tape around Yancey Knoll's Subaru. There was blood outside the driver's door. The driver's seat was saturated with blood.
When police respond to a murder, they're looking for a reason. Was anybody mad at Yancey? Did Yancey have any enemies?
There might have been some kind of road incident, some kind of traffic incident.
Now, what are people thinking? That there's a killer on the loose?
There was a killer on the loose. Anybody could have been the next target.
Police didn't know they were looking for a student of murder. Someone who would kill just to kill.
I'm Peter Van Sant. Tonight on 48 Hours, Student of Murder.
This case is about the presence of evil in our world.
It was like a bomb had dropped.
None of us is ever safe. Any of us could have been Yancey Knoll.
Prosecutors Adrian McCoy and Kristen Richardson say the murder of Yancey Knoll in 2012, shot to death in his car while stopped at a red light, put the city of Seattle on edge.
The police went all out. They took it very seriously.
Police are still looking for the suspect.
Yancey Knoll was shot and killed 1 week ago tonight.
Right now, the shooter is on the loose.
How big a story was this?
This was a very big story.
Allison Grandy is a reporter for Cairo 7, a CBS News affiliate.
We have shootings in Seattle. We don't necessarily have many shootings in that area of Seattle, that time of day, and that type of victim.
What were you hearing? Did Yancey Knoll have any enemies?
From talking to his friends, Yancey didn't have any enemies. He was an outdoorsy guy who enjoyed fine wine, loved what he did, working as a wine steward at QFC.
Hey, what's your name? Yancey.
Bottom line, 42-year-old Yancey Knoll
We're jumping, right? Yep, we're jumping.
was a good-hearted, happy-go-lucky guy.
Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah!
And, friends say, the idea that Yancey exploded into a road rage battle is ridiculous.
He drove like a grandma. He was very, very careful.
Longtime friend Brad Kenny.
He had a Subaru wagon, not known for its speed.
Was he an angry man?
No.
Was he impulsive?
No.
Reckless?
Never.
Verbally abusive?
God, no. Not even close. He was so careful and mindful with how he interacted with people.
Investigators suspect Yancey and his killer crossed paths around 7 p.m. on Interstate 5, just north of Seattle.
It's possible that there was some sort of confrontation and Yancey pulled up to the intersection thinking nothing of it.
Do you think he ever knew what hit him?
Never. He was killed instantly, thank God. He had no idea what happened.
The details of this shooting were curious to say the least. Right here, 5 shots were fired with remarkable accuracy. It was at about this time of day, and the shooter killed Yancey Knoll just a few feet from other motorists.
I hear 5 rapid shots, kind of like a pop, 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 pop.
Friends Kevin Watts and Angelo Rama were driving together when they heard those 5 pops behind them. The next thing they saw was a car speed away into oncoming traffic.
I drove by and I was like, that's kind of weird that someone wouldn't wait for a red light.
Upset that the driver had run the red light, the 2 friends hit the gas and gave chase.
We couldn't catch up to him.
How fast did that vehicle peel out of here?
0 to 60 in like 2-3 seconds. He was gone.
Rama and Watts gave up the chase and returned to the scene where a Subaru was still at the curb with its motor running. The friends had a sinking feeling that those pops they'd heard likely were gunshots.
I saw a lot of blood. I saw where the bullet holes were, and I realized that there's absolutely nothing I could do.
The shooter's bullets had hit Yancey 4 times in the head. The case was about to consume detectives Frank Clark and Dana Duffy for the next 2 years.
Yancey had no criminal history, no history of being a hothead. We really didn't have a lot to go on.
After closely inspecting the crime scene, the detectives realized Yancey's window was down and the shooter had fired those 5 shots right through his own passenger side window.
That's so strange to me. The shooter would shoot through the passenger side window of his car at someone else. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
No, it was strange to us as well. That was a huge piece of evidence.
The police now knew the shooter's car had a broken passenger side window, and there was more. Even though witness Angelo Rama had only glimpsed the fleeing car for a split second, something registered.
My first guess was an M4. It's a BMW car. The one that I saw was a convertible. It was silver.
Was the top up or down?
It was down. And when he was driving by, I noticed it had really, really nice silver rims.
Armed with his detailed description, the police advised the public to be on the lookout for that BMW model with that broken passenger side window. As for the driver,
I looked at the person who was driving the car because I'm really good with faces.
Kevin Watts helped a police artist come up with this remarkably detailed sketch of the shooter. Within a week, the sketch was released to the public, along with grainy still photos of the car from a nearby security camera.
We knew that police in Seattle were looking for a silver BMW, and they were pulling them over.
All over the city?
Yes, yes.
Police were desperate to stop the killer from striking again, not knowing if or when he would. 2 weeks went by, and then a suspect surfaced who surprised everyone.
When you see something like this from somebody who has it all together, he's not crazy. He's just evil.
Police are still looking for the suspect. He was driving a silver BMW.
In his 20s or 30s.
Did witnesses say?
Plea for anyone with information.
In the 2 weeks that followed Yancey Knowles' brutal execution, cops received hundreds of tips about that dark-haired suspect in a silver sports car.
It seemed at that time like everybody in the city of Seattle was driving a BMW Z4 or a Z3.
Then, on September 14th,
A woman calls in an anonymous tip.
for the first time, this mysterious man has a name.
And she provides a name of Din Bowman and his address, which is less than 10 blocks from the shooting site. When we pulled up a photo of him, matched the description of our sketch.
Did his hairstyle match?
Yes, and the age description matched.
And yet, the 29-year-old Din Bowman appears to be the most unlikely of potential suspects. He's a dazzling engineer with an inventive imagination.
The golf ball hits the lever of this press, which drives the drill, which spins the wire.
Like this Rube Goldberg contraption he created just for fun.
It swings over and hits this water bottle. The bottom of the water bottle is a magnetic plunger.
The people that we've spoken to have described him as brilliant.
A genius?
Others have titled him as a genius.
Which then triggers this flamethrower.
Bowman was only a 12-year-old when he entered college. In his 20s, Bowman opened his own business, a boutique engineering company called Vague Industries that specialized in robotics. And then, in 2007, Bowman met Jennifer Palm, a successful dentist at an education seminar. They were married a year later.
I thought they were what I considered to be a power couple. Very, very sophisticated.
Jess and Matta was a friend of the Bowmans.
What were they like as a couple?
Loving. The both of them, I think, understood one another.
But it was up to detectives Duffy and Clark to figure out Din Bowman, and they quickly learned that he had owned a BMW.
We wanted to know, does he still have that BMW? Is it still at his house? And immediately we came up with the plan that we're going to set up a surveillance on his residence.
A stakeout.
A stakeout.
A tense week went by with no sign of the BMW coming or going. But then the garage door opens up just enough for the detectives to spot a silver sports car.
Based on that information, we're able to obtain a search warrant.
Before dawn, on September 21st, 2012, as Din and Jennifer were leaving for work, police swooped in to arrest Din Bowman.
Din was placed in handcuffs and transported down to our office.
So you know, this is a police facility, and everything's being recorded, okay? Just to let you know that.
Bowman has to wait 2 hours for detectives to arrive to question him. While he's killing time, Bowman doesn't appear to be concerned. He enjoys some snacks and a cup of coffee. Exasperated, Bowman complains his precious time is being wasted.
Were you knocking?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, kind of getting a little annoyed at how long this is taking. Do I need to, like, it has to take as long as it takes, okay?
He was pretty confused about the whole thing. It was kind of weird.
Bowman also didn't realize that in another room, his wife, Jennifer, had agreed to answer questions from detectives Clark and Duffy.
Have you heard of any murders, like, within a few blocks of your house in the last few weeks?
I'm not sure. You're not sure? It's a yes or no question. I'm not sure.
We call it the I'm not sure interview.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Because her responses were overwhelmingly, I'm not sure.
So your honesty right now is paramount. I understand. I'm not sure what I can tell you.
Jennifer didn't know that the detectives had already inspected Din's BMW and had discovered from these markings that the passenger side window had been replaced. Remember, investigators were certain the killer had fired through that glass.
The first thing we did was open the passenger door, and you could see glass shards in the well of the door jamb. Also, within the garage, there was this fresh smell of paint.
That's because the BMW's silver rims had been painted black.
What about the paint smell that we're smelling in there? I'm not sure. Do you know anything that goes on in your house?
For nearly 4 hours,
He bled all over the frickin' streets of Seattle, okay?
investigators hammered Jennifer for answers.
And I'm tired of you sitting there playing dumb.
While the interview was going on, investigators entered the Bowman's house, which was surprisingly bare.
We knew that Jennifer was the primary breadwinner in that household, and we knew from serving some of our search warrants that she made probably $250,000 a year. But when we got into the home, she had hardly any bedroom furniture. Her mattress laid on the floor.
As they went room to room, investigators discovered a small arsenal of weapons and ammunition. Everything except the suspected murder weapon, a 9mm Glock. When detectives finally got to Bowman, they hoped he would answer a few questions. But Bowman was smart enough to shut down the interview.
Do you want to talk to a lawyer, or you want to talk to us first?
No, I guess I'd like to talk to a lawyer.
Bowman might have been done with the detectives, but they were far from finished with him.
You're going to be charged with a crime.
Of what?
Murder.
Of what? Of who?
Murder of a human being.
Okay.
It was something to see. At least 45 friends of murder victim Yancey Knoll packed arraignment court this morning to get a look at this man.
You watch this man walk in and you see this unassuming person and you go, why? Why would you do this?
Din Bowman has been in custody for 4 months for the murder of Yancey Knoll. And at this hearing, Bowman learns his bail is set at a stunning $10 million, a sum he cannot make.
He hasn't shown any sign of guilt or even fear.
Brad Kenny is desperate for answers.
It just fills you with so much anger.
While Bowman appears stoic in court, prosecutors say the alleged killer has a quirky side that emerges in hundreds of recorded jailhouse phone calls with his wife, Jennifer.
They had pet names. Din was Bunny, and Mrs. Bowman, Jennifer, was Snuggles.
Bunny and Snuggles.
Bunny and Snuggles.
When they talk to each other, they talk in baby talk.
Bunny, Bunny, how are you? I'm doing good. How's my little snuggle cake? I just wrote you an email. Yay.
It was very strange. Very strange.
I miss so many things right now. I know. I don't have a Snuggles. You don't have a snuggle plum next to you.
Everyone warned us, don't listen to the jail calls. Don't listen to the jail calls. You'll want to throw up.
I'm just going to say love, 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 love. Love, 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 love.
Meanwhile, back among the grown-ups, detectives Frank Clark and Dana Duffy were methodically building their homicide case against Bowman. They discovered that for years, the tech-savvy genius had been downloading these books, articles, and videos to his computer on the subject of death and murder.
It's not that he just had a little bit of it, he had tons of it.
And then there was Bowman's obsession with this man.
Bond. James Bond.
And it showed in Bowman's computer videos. That's Din Bowman driving a car at high speeds around an obstacle course. And here he is blasting away in shooting demonstrations where he proved he was an expert marksman with either hand.
I don't believe that Din Bowman got up that morning thinking, today's the day. that I'm going to shoot somebody. This situation presented itself somehow. But once it did, then all his self-training and research kicked in.
We're going to talk about shooting through glass.
And one of Bowman's videos, made by a firearms expert, really shocked police.
I've come into a situation where I feel threatened by somebody off to my passenger side.
It was a play-by-play of Yancey's murder.
Of course, I recognize, I come down, I grip, I cross parallel, extend, touch, press.
If you want to know how to shoot somebody in traffic from your very fancy sports car, it was an awfully helpful video. He didn't even have to roll down his window.
Prosecutors came to believe Bowman wanted to kill someone just for the thrill of it.
Why would he commit this murder in broad daylight, where there are witnesses around who could see his car, perhaps see him?
What's the fun of it if there's no challenge, if there's no witnesses, if there's no need to get away, to speed off and fly through neighborhood streets and hide your car in your garage? That was the fun for him.
Soon after the murder, police say that Bowman went to his computer where he had his vast library of murder-related books, including Arrest Proof Yourself.
How to cover up a murder, how to get rid of a gun, how to get rid of gunshot residue.
And police say Bowman now had an accomplice, Jennifer Bowman, AKA Snuggles.
Do you understand how serious this is right now, Jennifer?
Jennifer, to me, seemed very, very nervous.
Tell us the truth.
Poor eye contact. I could see that she was shaky.
Tell me the truth right now.
I have told you the truth.
Jennifer never asked for a lawyer and handed over her purse, where police found receipts that aided the investigation.
Do either of you have the belief that Jennifer had prior knowledge of this attack?
I don't think she had prior knowledge, but I believe that at some point Din told her what happened. She had to know something because the next day she went to Portland with him.
Why'd you go to Portland?
It was just a little day trip, a little road trip.
A trip that led to this auto glass shop where police say Bowman began to cover up his crime, his wife by his side.
She was very standoffish. She didn't say much.
Repairman Jeff Shields.
He just seemed like he needed a window right away.
Bowman told Shields the BMW window had been shattered by a thief while he and Jennifer were eating in Portland.
What time of day was the window broken?
We found it in the afternoon.
At approximately what time?
It was right after we ate lunch.
But detectives say a restaurant receipt from Jennifer's purse told a different story.
They were never there for lunch. They went there at dinner time.
3 weeks later, the Bowmans visited a tire store in northern Seattle. Manager Doug Haskett says Bowman used the name Peter while his wife avoided eye contact.
She was a blonde, and she just kind of looked at the ground. She really wouldn't talk to anybody.
Bowman bought 4 cheaper tires to replace the expensive BMW tires.
How would he get new tires?
Because during our investigation, the media released that there were tire tread tracks left at the scene.
Why did he get new tires?
I'm not sure.
Were the other ones wore out?
I'm not sure.
What if we put you on a polygraph test today?
You'd fail it like a sack of potatoes. I mean, I can tell you're lying just looking at you.
Police say they later found the set of expensive, practically new BMW tires inside Bowman's workshop at Vague Industries. The murder weapon was never recovered, but prosecutors felt they had enough evidence to try Din Bowman for first-degree murder.
Please rise.
And he would soon take the stand and tell a story he had long kept secret.
If I didn't do something right then, I was going to die.
Frank, what do we have here?
Peter, we're in the evidence warehouse of the Seattle Police Department.
2 vehicles, side by side, once again. just as they were on that summer evening in August 2012.
This is Din Bowman's BMW Roadster Z4 and Yancey Knoll's Subaru.
What brought them together is unclear. The result of their encounter is not.
What goes through your mind when you look inside this car?
Sadness, devastation for Yancey.
His family lost a loving member. Murder is very ugly. It's never pretty.
And now, on November 19th, 2014, 2 years after Yancey Knoll was savagely gunned down, his alleged killer enters the courtroom to face the charge of first-degree murder.
Please rise. Court is now in session.
By the time of trial, he looked like he was 13.
Din Bowman is transformed. Gone is the confident, cocky young man who first met with detectives.
Do you want to talk to a lawyer or you want to talk to us first?
No, I guess I'd like to talk to a lawyer.
And in his place is what appears to be a clean-cut college student.
This guy doesn't look like a killer, and that's not at all uncommon for defendants to change their appearance in order to appeal to the jury.
Bowman's mother, a native of Vietnam, and his father, a Boeing engineer, are in court every day to support their only child. But his cooing wife, Jennifer, his snuggles, is nowhere to be seen.
We are ready to begin opening statements.
Prosecutor Adrian McCoy tells jurors that the motive for murder wasn't greed or jealousy.
This was a fulfillment of a quest.
But something far more macabre.
A quest to know what it would be like to kill someone.
McCoy attempts to take the jury inside Bowman's mind by showing these training videos recovered from his computer.
We're going to talk about shooting through glass.
From video to thousands of pages of research on killing another person, prosecutors paint a portrait of a premeditated murder.
It was the equivalent of the Library of Congress on death.
You ever seen anything like this before in your career?
Not even close.
Why was all that stuff on his computer?
He hoarded information. He had a lot of things on his computer that are totally bizarre. Having possession of it doesn't mean anything. Mr. Bowman was actually trying to create a library of basically everything.
Bowman's lawyer, prominent defense attorney John Henry Brown, whose former clients include serial killer Ted Bundy, says there's no evidence that Bowman ever read or watched any of these materials.
There were thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pages about engineering techniques, but also there was all this bizarre stuff that the prosecutors used in order to make up their motive.
As the defense presents its case, Brown takes a big gamble.
You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury.
He puts Din Bowman on the stand.
I felt like it was just this crazy bad dream, and I was running from a monster.
And Brown knows he's risking it all on Bowman's ability to sway jurors and convince them that he was the victim of road rage.
If I didn't do something right then, I was going to die.
Bowman explains that it all began when he accidentally cut off Yancey Knoll on the interstate.
There was sort of a stream of swearing. I think the phrase that caught my attention was, you better learn how to drive that fancy car, boy, or you're gonna get yourself up.
Bowman says Yancey closely followed him off the interstate to this traffic light, where they both stopped.
And it was that point when I got wham! Yeah.
That wham, Bowman says, was a wine bottle thrown by Yancey that hit him in the head.
He's an absolute liar. That's sacrilegious to Yancey. He would never throw and waste wine on somebody like that.
I remember seeing his eyes really like bulging, and Like as he was yelling, I would describe it as just like violent hatred that you would, I had only seen in the movies.
Did you think it was possibly a gun?
Yeah. I was scared.
Fearing for his life, Bowman says he pulled out his 9mm Glock, pointed it at Yancey, and fired.
You intentionally shot him?
Yes.
Was it your intent to kill him?
No.
Road rage is by definition not premeditation.
And Bowman says he shot Yancey Knoll in self-defense.
I remember opening my eyes, seeing that I had the gun in my hand, and I just dropped the gun and stepped on the gas.
Though Bowman claims he was the victim, he didn't call the police. Panicked, Bowman says he collected evidence from his car, including the wine bottle and the gun, and threw it all away.
Throwing away of the evidence that would support his own story. This is a guy who's genius level IQ, right?
Well, but a lot of geniuses I know don't have a lot of common sense.
You threw away the evidence that you could show the police to prove you were not a criminal, right?
I didn't think they would even believe me.
But prosecutor Kristen Richardson isn't buying a word of Bowman's story.
So you don't think that most husbands would go home to their wives and say, oh my God, I almost got killed.
I figured the more that he talked, the worse it was going to get for him.
You're an expert shooter. What was your target?
There was no aiming involved in this.
Okay, well, you did a pretty good job, didn't you? Because you hit him 4 times in the head, including the temple, right?
That surprised me.
For 3 days, Richardson hammers away at Bowman.
You lied to your parents, you lied to your wife, right?
Is that a question?
But he never loses his composure.
Mr. Bowman, you have no trouble answering yes or no to Mr. Brown. Is there something wrong with the way I ask questions of you?
No. It seemed like a strange question.
Okay, well, that's the first no I think I've gotten from you, so I guess the point's been made. I have nothing else. Thank you.
You may step down, sir. Thank you.
As Din Bowman steps down, the question is, did he convince the jury that he killed Yancey Knoll to save his life?
I think Jim deeply believed the jury would see that. Self-defense is justifiable homicide.
Or simply for the thrill.
Is he guilty of murder in the first degree? Yes.
I will never forget Yancey.
Every time he hikes this trail, Brad Kenny thinks of his friend Yancey Knoll.
I really miss him. It's never going to be over, and I'll always miss him. I mean, it's good to be here, but it's really difficult.
Please rise.
After 3 weeks and 31 witnesses, Din Bowman's murder trial is coming to a close.
He hasn't shown one iota of remorse. He's just completely stoic.
I think we're ready for the jurors.
On December 9th, 2014, more than 2 years after Yancey Knoll's murder, and coincidentally, Din Bowman's 32nd birthday, jurors begin deliberations.
It's the worst part of the job, waiting for a verdict. But it's just the nature of it. You always doubt yourself.
One person not doubting himself is Din Bowman, as he confides to his wife Jennifer in recorded jailhouse phone calls.
We should chastise the jurors if they take longer than tomorrow.
Jennifer has not appeared a single day of Bowman's trial, but she stays in constant contact and has no doubt whatsoever of his innocence.
This is obvious. They need to acquit. Like, how could they consider anything else? You'd have to be completely irrational to believe anything else.
Be seated, please.
On day 3, the jury returns.
I understand the jury has reached a verdict. I will read the verdict form. We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Ben Bowman, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree as charged.
Guilty.
The jury didn't buy Den Bowman's claim.
He admits he killed Noel, but says it was
First-degree murder required premeditation.
It's a total surprise to Bowman, but sweet relief to Yancey's girlfriend and his supporters.
The verdict is read. What was that moment like for Den?
Well, he was so emotionally upset. He said, I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe it.
3 weeks later, a very different-looking Den Bowman is back in court for sentencing.
Mr. Bowman made some bad decisions.
The once cocky boy genius is gone as the reality of the guilty verdict sinks in, and his parents step forward to beg the judge for mercy.
I know this is my fault.
Defense attorney Brown must finish reading her statement.
Our son's acts are our faults. My husband and I, we provided and allowed him to learn a gun for self-protection.
Brown, a seasoned trial lawyer, can't help but show emotion as Den's mother asks the judge to send her to prison in place of her only child.
Please ask you to allow myself to substitute any punishment by placing myself in Den's role.
It was heartbreaking to watch his mother at sentencing, for her to offer herself in his place, to do his punishment for him. That's real.
Moments later, it's Bowman's turn.
Den, are you able to speak?
But Yancey's girlfriend and his supporters refuse to listen.
I'm disappointed that the jurors didn't believe me.
And the first words out of Den's mouth when he's asked to make a statement at sentencing is not about his parents or his heartbroken mother or Yancey's friends or family. It's, I can't believe the jury didn't believe me. That's his focus.
I don't envy your task of having to make the burden of deciding my fate. And I'm sorry for placing you in that situation. And all I can ask is for your mercy and for your help.
As the judge is about to deliver Bowman's sentence, he has something he feels compelled to say.
I feel very sorry for your parents, Mr. Bowman, and I want to tell them that it is not their fault. Mr. Bowman is responsible for his own actions.
Bowman gets 29 years and 1 month, slightly less than the maximum. The case against Den Bowman is over, but the police feel there's unfinished business.
Was Jennifer misleading or dishonest or lying at any point during this questioning?
Yes, she was.
I would very much like her to be charged with a crime.
The crime of helping her husband cover up Yancey's murder.
Frank, would you like her to be charged with a crime?
Yes, I would.
Jennifer today has changed her name and her job.
She opened the door.
But we tracked her down in Seattle.
Hey, Jennifer. Peter Van Sant, 48 Hours. Why did you lie to detectives? Why did you help your husband cover up a murder? You can talk to us. No answers still.
Ultimately, the state attorney chose not to bring charges against Jennifer, and she in turn has cut off all ties with the man she once endearingly called her bunny. Today, the house the couple lived in sits empty. The 2 cars at the heart of this case remain in a police warehouse. But the memories of Yancey Noel remain as alive as ever.
Ready? 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 Get it!
One of my friends' mom had texted me because she lived pretty close to Grapevine Lake. And she was like, look what happened.
A developing story right now, a body found on the banks of Grapevine Lake.
Nothing happens in Grapevine. Nothing except for what he did.
The victim was identified as Jacqueline Vandagriff.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacqueline Vandagriff, but friends call me Jackie.
Jackie Vandagriff was 24 years of age.
I am currently a junior here at Texas Women's University, and my major is nutrition with an emphasis in wellness.
And just beyond this area where the shade is pretty much hitting is where we had our crime scene. There are a lot of things that will shock you, and this is by far the worst thing I have seen.
My manager texted me, Charles has just been arrested. I felt like the world was spinning, like everything was out of control.
It's believed that last Tuesday, Jacqueline Vandagriff met up with Charles Bryant at a bar in Denton. Surveillance video, also cell phone pings, all put Vandagriff and Bryant together.
I remember him just being kind of quiet. I immediately said, there's no way. They have the wrong guy. There's no way that he did this.
Are you telling me there's no evidence that Charles Bryant killed Jackie Vandagriff?
Not direct evidence.
This is kind of my calling, dealing with these really strange cases, the serial killers, the ritualistic killings.
Hey, how you doing? Good. Jim home with the Rangers. Life good today or not?
This is not a normal homicide.
You know how they kill someone.
It all seemed to have started with Caitlin.
How screwed up are you from Caitlin, man?
In the early days, it was good. After that first month, that's when I started to see these warning signs that he was manipulative, very controlling. I just told him, I can't do this anymore, this isn't working, this is over. He flipped out.
He showed up at your dorm room out of the blue. You never gave him the address.
No.
You know you trespassed. In his mind, he was seeking revenge.
The warrant that we got is for stalking.
On his ex-girlfriend, who had called the police on him.
How he was stalking me was completely related to Jackie Vandagriff's death.
There's some similarities in the way that Vandagriff looks and the way that Brian's ex-girlfriend looked.
Do you think there's a chance, a possibility, that he walked into this bar and saw somebody who reminded him of you and took his rage out on her?
Most definitely. I think that he really wanted to kill me. I think that he wanted me dead.
When I first arrived on the scene, I saw a lot of police cars, saw fire trucks. There was a lot of activity.
It was September 14th, 2016, just before dawn, when John Luna, a captain with the Grapevine Police Department, responded to a call about a gruesome discovery here at Grapevine Lake.
Just off of the worn footpath, you have an area that's pretty well overgrown with weeds, but you can clearly see a small area that was burned just beyond where I'm standing. There was a body that was obviously charred. It had been set on fire.
The body, found inside a blue kiddie pool, was so badly damaged that police could not determine the most basic facts about the victim.
We didn't know if that was an adult or a child, male or female.
The next day, using fingerprints, police were able to identify the victim. It was Jackie Vandagriff, a 24-year-old nutrition major at Texas Women's University in nearby Denton.
I chose this major because I realized the importance of nutrition and just overall health.
We're both named Jacqueline, named after Jacqueline Kennedy.
One of Jackie Vandagriff's closest friends, Jackie Tan. They met in high school.
Ever since then, we were Jackie squared, and I loved it. She made me feel like I could be myself and just be goofy and funny.
Jackie Tan remembers her friend as a good student who was focused and trusting.
That girl, smartest girl I've known.
She had her whole life ahead of her. She had plans. Me and my detectives, we went out there for her memorial service. And, sorry.
For Captain Luna, the brutality of this crime hit close to home.
Could have just as easily been my daughter that this happened to.
Jackie spent the last evening of her life in Denton with this man. Police didn't know his identity right away, but this woman knew him very well.
He would always give me flowers, always, especially if he had something to be sorry about.
Charles Bryant lived some 20 miles away, but he had been making frequent visits to Denton, trying to rekindle a relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin Mathis, who had recently moved there to attend the University of North Texas.
He was just trying to win me back, and I was just like, nothing is gonna work.
Caitlin's involvement with Bryant had begun 3 months earlier, in June, in the town of Grapevine, when it came into the restaurant where Caitlin was working as a server.
The day that I met him was the day after I graduated high school. He had lots of muscles and tattoos, which kind of interested me at the time.
Bryant was then 29, working as a bartender and personal trainer.
You're 18, he's 29. He's got muscles and tattoos and must have made your mother crazy.
Yeah, extremely crazy. In a good way, though, yeah. She cared about me.
Being a mother of adult children is a different role. You have to let go for them to fly away and grow up with you.
Caitlin is the youngest of Karen Halsey's 4 children. She says Caitlin was hard to miss.
Fireball. You know, when she's in the house, she never walked anywhere. She ran everywhere.
And Caitlin ran headlong into the relationship with Charles Bryant that summer of 2016. One of their regular date spots was at the park by Grapevine Lake, where this picture was taken. When Karen learned about the relationship, she asked Caitlin to show her a picture of him.
I got this feeling just deep inside to my bones, an evil feeling. And I said, he's going to hurt you. He's going to do something bad.
Wow.
And she's like, oh, he's nice. He's good to me. He makes me feel like an adult.
Were you thinking to yourself, you're 18, you're too young to know?
Yes. But I didn't want to insult her.
Within weeks, Caitlin was having serious doubts of her own about Bryant.
That's when I started to see these warning signs that he was manipulative, he was a bit of a narcissist. He thought very highly of himself. He would say things like, oh, you'll never find anyone better than me. It was toxic, and he was toxic.
In mid-August 2016, Caitlin broke up with Bryant. She thought that was the last she'd see of him. But the next day, he showed up uninvited at her mother's house.
And somehow he convinced me to get back with him. He was trying to say, oh, I can work on this and I can be better, and making all these promises.
But Caitlin realized she wasn't interested in promises.
That was one of the things that my mom taught me. People do not change. You can't change someone. At that point, I was just waiting for the perfect time to end things.
A little more than a week later, after Caitlin moved away to school, she told Brian it was over again. Later that night, police found him on campus.
Just by sheer coincidence, I had made a traffic stop and he was driving that vehicle.
Captain Jeremy Polk was then a lieutenant for the UNT campus police. He pulled Brian over early in the morning of August 24th.
I thought he was an intoxicated driver by the way he was driving, and that was my focus.
So right now I'm going to have to place you on, arrest. So good, you can just remain seated. It's all good.
Bryant was not over the legal limit. He was charged with a few outstanding traffic tickets, and they let him go. Later that same day, he was back on Caitlin's campus again.
He actually knocked on the door of my dorm room. He didn't know prior to where I lived. And he said, "Oh, your name was on the door."
Did that creep you out?
It did. At that point, I was scared.
Caitlin got him out of there and called campus police. Captain Polk recognized Bryant's name on the report and went along to interview Caitlin the next day.
She told us things like, I just did not like the way Charles spoke to me. I did not like the way he treated me, and I made that choice then and there. I would do everything I could to help her with this situation.
Polk issued a no trespass order, banning Charles Bryant from the UNT campus. But once again, Bryant would not take no for an answer.
The biggest fear I have as a police officer sometimes is emotion, because emotion drives people to do things you would never imagine.
It was my first day there, and he walked through the door, and my heart just dropped to the bottom of my stomach.
It was August 31st, 2016, a week since Charles Bryant had tracked Caitlin Mathis down at her new dorm. And now he was invading her space again, coming into her new restaurant on her first day of work.
I was like, "I just want you to leave."
What did he say to that?
He didn't really say anything. He looked upset. My new coworkers, they were like, "Yeah, he was here yesterday looking for you."
Caitlin asked her manager to keep Bryant out, but her manager said there was nothing he could do.
"I can't work here. I don't feel safe enough to work here."
Caitlin went back to her old job a half-hour's drive away. Her mother found it all hard to watch from a distance.
I said, "Come home." It was my motherly instinct to protect her, and in order to protect her, I had to have her with me.
But Caitlin thought she'd be safe in her dorm. A week later, on September 6th, what would have been their 3-month anniversary, Bryant was back, yet again.
He showed up to my dorm, knocked on my door, and at this point, I was shaking. I'm all alone. I actually hid in my suite mate's closet.
You hid?
Yes. When I was on the phone with the police, they were like, "We can't hear you, you need to speak up." And I was just afraid that he was gonna hear my voice. I did hear him say, "Caitlin, I know you're in there, just open up, I have something for you." And I'm like, "God, what do you have for me? I don't want it."
Bryant left flowers and a 2-page letter. When police arrived, he was gone.
I heard him say, "Hey, it's Charles, I have something for you."
You know for sure it was him?
Yeah, I know it was him.
Sheriff 27, myself and 443 and a PI.
Police found him outside 10 minutes later.
You have school here? No. What's your name?
Now in running clothes, and arrested him for trespassing.
Well, you know you're not supposed to be up there.
Bryant posted bond and was released within hours. Although Caitlin had already blocked him on her phone, email, and social media, he created a new email address and wrote to her later that same day. "Here I am, heartbroken and with a criminal record for bringing the girl I love flowers."
That's when it became really serious for me. If an actual physical arrest doesn't stop the behavior, then something is wrong.
Captain Polk helped Caitlin get an emergency protective order. And because Bryant had kept trying to reach her after his arrest,
How you doing, Charles? You have your ID with you?
Polk had his officers go to Bryant's house the next day and charge him yet again, this time for stalking. This was his third arrest in 14 days.
I told him if he continued to communicate with Caitlin, I would use every email, I would use every text message, I would use every phone call as a reason to have him rearrested.
2 days later, Bryant posted a $5,000 bond and got out of jail.
He was telling his roommate that I was the crazy one in this relationship. So all of his friends were kind of coming at me, and they were like, "Why you need to like drop these charges against him?"
By September 13th, Bryant was back in Denton, just a half mile from Caitlin's dorm, in an area she had told him about back when they were still dating.
I was talking about going up to Fry Street and like meeting new people.
Bryant went to Fry Street Public House that night at about 7 p.m. An hour later, Jackie Vandagriff walked in, asked about a job, and ended up in a conversation with the bartender and Charles Bryant. About 45 minutes later, Jackie posted a message on her Twitter. "I'm glad I decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar." Jackie's friend, Jackie Tan.
Jackie was a very social person. Whenever she went out, she would make friends with everybody. And it wasn't even flirty. It wasn't anything, you know. She was talking to the bartender, talking to other people.
At about 9 o'clock, Jackie left with Bryant and the bartender. She and Bryant went to another bar nearby and started talking to a group of women. By 9:45, it was raining and everyone was headed out. Jackie left with Charles Bryant.
I feel like she felt comfortable enough with him that night because she had been hanging out with him for so long that she was like, hey, well, whatever. He's just gonna drop me off. It's not that far, and I'll be good.
Once in his car, Bryant stopped at a convenience store. This was the last time Jackie Vandagriff was seen alive. The day after she was found dead, there was a new post on her Twitter. "Never knew I could feel like this."
It was just really bizarre.
Police suspected it was a message from her killer, and they knew they had to move quickly to ID the man Jackie had been with. They had some luck when they tracked down the women Jackie met that night.
One of the friends that was with her had gotten a business card from this person because he was a fitness instructor.
Now the Grapevine police had Charles Bryant's name. They learned about that restraining order.
So in my eyes, that played into him as being a good suspect.
Grapevine police called Captain Polk, who was in the middle of a road race.
The first thing he told me was Charles Bryant was their main suspect in Jackie's murder, and I immediately just sat down on a park bench in the middle of the race. It floored me.
Bryant was emerging as a strong suspect, but Grapevine police did not have physical evidence connecting him to Jackie's death. So for now, Bryant was free, and Polk was worried about what he might do next.
I called Caitlin and I just asked, "Where are you?"
I was like, does this have to do with the murder that happened in Grapevine? And he's like, I can't specify that to you, Caitlin, but are you safe right now?
And what did you say?
I said, I think so.
She might have been wrong. In the days after Jackie's murder, Charles Bryant sent Caitlin several emails, including this picture, writing on it, "First kiss under this tree once upon a time." That photo was taken at Grapevine Lake.
He might have taken that picture that same day that Jackie was killed.
It was September 2016, and Caitlin Mathis, Charles Bryant's ex-girlfriend, was very worried he might have been involved in the brutal murder at Grapevine Lake just days before.
I was waiting for more news to come out because at that point they hadn't even arrested him yet.
Were you worried he was going to come after you?
I was. I thought that's exactly what he was going to do.
The emails and picture Bryant had recently sent Caitlin were proof that he was still thinking about her in the days after Jackie was killed. But they were also proof of something else.
It was prohibited for Charles to communicate with her in any manner, and that if he did, he would have been violating that order.
Captain Polk thought they could use those violations to help the Grapevine police, who didn't have enough to make an arrest yet.
So I told the detective, we can get a warrant signed on some evidence we just got and at least, get him off the street.
You go by Charles, you go by Dean? Charles. Okay.
Charles Bryant was arrested on September 18th for violating Caitlin's restraining order. Grapevine detectives were hoping they'd soon find more evidence connecting him to Jackie's death.
He's brought to the Grapevine Police Department for an interview, and right away he's beginning to distance himself from having almost any interaction with Jackie.
You recognize who she is?
We saw her at a bar.
And at the same time, we began serving a search warrant for his residence.
What can you tell me about her? That's about it, I guess.
It had been 4 days since Jackie's body was found. Plenty of time to dispose of any possible evidence. But Captain Luna at Grapevine PD says they found a lot at Bryant's home, including a large military-style knife.
You know what? Her purse was found in there too.
Bryant had no way to answer for any of it, including 2 more items police found while he was in custody. Video of him buying a shovel the night Jackie disappeared, and a kiddie pool missing from his backyard that matched the one Jackie's body was found in.
We have video of you with this girl.
Showed me.
You're at the bar. You're walking around Walmart at 4 o'clock in the morning buying a shovel. She's found dead in a pool that came from your backyard.
He even got to the point at the end of his interview with our detective where he said, well, I must have done it. I don't remember doing anything.
Everything points to me. It's like I had to have done it.
An open and shut case? Not even close. Although there was overwhelming evidence that Bryant had disposed of Jackie's body, there was no evidence yet that confirmed how Jackie had died, or that Bryant had killed her.
And that's when they reached out to me and asked if I could come in and spend some time with him and interview him and see what I could get.
Because you have an expertise in dealing with this kind of personality.
Right, this is kind of my calling.
Jim Holland is the senior member of an elite team of Texas Rangers, a select division of the Texas State Police. He specializes in interviewing some of the country's most prolific killers and analyzing their thoughts.
Hey, how you doing?
And Charles Bryant seemed to fit the bill. Jackie's body had been dismembered before being set on fire. How do you begin to understand a mind that would do that?
A lot of these people actually want to tell you. They want to tell someone.
At first, Bryant kept to his claim that he didn't remember a thing.
Yeah, it's crazy because I really don't remember meeting this girl.
The idea that he doesn't remember doing it, oh no, it's absolute nonsense.
So you knew Charles Bryant remembered exactly what had happened.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And your job was just to pull that out of him.
Right.
You know, you're not a violent dude. You haven't really been in trouble.
Holland says his strategy was to try to make friends with Bryant and get him talking.
You know, you obviously work out. I mean, you're a stud, right?
You don't want him to look at you as a law enforcement officer. You want him to think of you as a friend, a compadre, a drinking buddy. You know, you kind of go back to what 2 boys would talk about in a high school locker room, you know, about the girl they kissed on Friday night.
You don't have any issues with girls.
No, not by any means. They're just blowing my mind.
And Holland suggested possible scenarios to see if Bryant would take it from there.
Okay, so something happens. Bam, there's a snap. And we need to figure out what that is. And maybe, you know, she got mad. Maybe
she's giving you all the signals and then cut you off. I mean, there could be all kinds of different things going on here, right? I mean, chicks, right? You know chicks? You know, as we're going through the interview, I'm watching him. I'm, I guess in a way, a human lie detector. I'm reading him and I'm throwing things at him in which I know the answer, and I'm looking for his responses, whether they're false or true.
Under the pretense of helping Bryant remember what happened, Holland suggested they do a memory exercise.
What we're going to do is these mind exercises, which means we're going to move back in time.
Bryant, who first claimed he didn't know who Jackie was, then seemed to remember her. He said he could see her coming into the bar.
I think she was looking for a job. That's what it was.
And offering her a ride.
It makes sense. It was raining. I probably would offer a ride home.
There's tons of things in this that I can tell you, right?
Over a pizza, as Holland tried to steer Bryant to confess, he probed about a possible motive.
But what does everyone want to know? And yeah, why? And who's the only one who can tell us that?
Me.
You know?
Holland eventually cut to the chase and asked if what happened with Jackie was really all about Caitlin.
Was there a time that you pictured her as this girlfriend that did you wrong, or did anything like that come into play?
No.
The level of nonsense that came out of his mouth at different points about that was just astonishing.
Do you think Charles Bryant looks around the bar and sees Jacqueline Vandagriff? Ah, she looks like Caitlin.
It wouldn't surprise me if he actually mistook her at first. You know, that saw her from behind and thought, man, you know, my ex is here. I think in his mind that whole night, I think that's what he pictured.
After the murder, right after the murder, he took Jackie's phone and used it to add me on Facebook.
When Texas Ranger Jim Holland was brought in to interrogate Charles Bryant, the nature of the crime made him wonder if Bryant's brain was wired like the serial killers he'd encountered. In what way is the mind of a serial killer different from common criminal?
You know, generally people like that tend to be sociopathic or psychopathic mindsets, and it's just a different game. Psychopath would be someone who's basically born with a scar on their brain. Then a sociopathic mindset is something that society has brought on. Something happened to them that changed their psyche.
Something maybe had happened in his childhood.
Christy Dixon got a glimpse of Charles Bryant's psyche firsthand. She met him on a dating app the year before Jackie Vandagriff's death.
He seemed pretty quiet and reserved, almost like he was shy. By the second or third time that we were hanging out, I noticed he was getting pretty attached pretty quickly, and I just was not there. It was very casual to me.
After she broke things off, he continued to pursue her. Bryant even told her that he loved her. Christy says they'd never even shared a kiss.
It was a little too much too soon, too fast. I work with abused children, and that to me kind of stuck out.
Christy says that's when she asked Bryant about his childhood. He told her he had been molested, a claim that 48 Hours could not independently verify.
I remember thinking, that makes sense. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but his behavior sort of came off to me as maybe an abused child or someone who is just needing that extra love that most people probably aren't seeking.
Still, Christy thought he was harmless and stayed in touch.
I thought he was just a really nice guy and felt sorry for him.
I'm not an angry guy. I'm not aggressive.
As Ranger Holland continued his interrogation, he wanted to see if Bryant would answer the key question: how did Jackie Vandagriff die? Her autopsy didn't provide many answers.
There's a lot we didn't know. We didn't know where it occurred. We didn't know exactly how it broke down. And so that's what my goal was.
Holland wondered if the crime had a sexual element, but initially, Bryant denied anything sexual took place.
I don't recall having sex.
You don't? No, normally I recall having sex.
After 3 more hours of interrogation, Bryant said they did have sex. Kinky sex. According to Bryant, Jackie wanted to be choked with an oversized zip tie that just happened to be in his car.
She didn't fight you in any way when you were putting it on?
The consensual sex aspect of it was one of those things that no, I felt strongly that he was lying about.
And Bryant also claimed that neither he nor Jackie had tightened the zip tie intentionally.
Okay. So you think he just tightened up on its own, basically? Not so much that, like, it had a snag on something or... Okay. Then what happened? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, she's not responsive. Shake her. Nothing.
Are you just thinking this is a complete and total lie?
Yeah, it's total fabrication. Did he kill her? Yes, absolutely. When you deal with these people, it's so rare that you would sit down with them and they would just tell you A to Z, this is what occurred. And they're always going to leave out things that make them look really bad. In other words, there's an excuse. I'm not a bad person. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was an accident.
Although Bryant was evasive about how Jackie died, as Holland led him through the memory exercise, Bryant went into gruesome detail about how he disposed of her body.
Okay, what do you see in the pool?
Garbage bags.
All right, now tell me exactly what you see occurring after that.
I go down that trail.
And what happens next?
Just lit it on fire.
The fire. Why do you burn the body?
Spirit evidence.
Even if he couldn't admit to murder, Bryant seemed to waver between denial and acceptance, at one point conceding that the evidence showed he had to have done it.
I can't fight it. It's obviously me.
After an intense 6-hour interrogation and with mounting evidence, Charles Bryant was finally charged with Jackie Vandagriff's murder. Christy Dixon could not believe the news.
That night, I actually was scared to go to sleep. I had nightmares. He had never threatened me before, but just the fact that someone that I felt that I knew had murdered someone potentially, I was terrified.
For Caitlin Mathis, her worst fears were confirmed. And when she tried to learn more about the woman Bryant killed, she made a shocking discovery on Facebook.
I looked up Jackie Vandagriff and I realized, oh my God, I'm already friends with her.
Caitlin says that digital friendship began after Jackie's death.
You got a friend request from Jackie Vandagriff.
Yes.
Caitlin believes that Facebook friend request could only have come from one person, Charles Bryant.
That really sounds diabolical.
It was.
Bryant pleaded not guilty to Jackie's murder. His defense was the same story he told Ranger Holland.
These two young people met. They consumed a lot of alcohol. Our position is they had sex, kinky sex albeit, and she died.
Bryant's court-appointed defense attorney, Glynis McGinty, says Jackie Vandagriff's death was a tragic accident.
Are you telling me there's no evidence that Charles Bryant killed Jackie Vandagriff?
Not direct evidence.
Prosecutors Lucas Allen and Anna Hernandez believed the evidence they did have would be enough, but they also knew that most jurors want a motive, and they weren't sure they'd be able to tell this jury why they thought Jackie was targeted.
You have to wonder what is driving this person to do something like that.
In your minds, there is no doubt that the murder of Jackie Vandagriff is connected to the stalking of Caitlin Mathis.
Yes, I think we believe that, definitely. She might have just been victim number one, with Caitlin being victim number two.
To help prove this, the prosecution was hoping the judge would allow Caitlin to testify against her ex-boyfriend turned stalker in open court.
I felt sick.
What do you think was the most telling part of Charles Bryant's interview? Take a look at the evidence in the case against Bryant on Facebook at 48 Hours.
Jackie was the most special person. I know I'll never meet someone like her again.
In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie Vandagriff's untimely death, Charles Bryant was standing trial for her murder. Her friend Jackie Tan could not bring herself to be there.
I wanted to go, but I'm going to be honest. I couldn't look at him.
Charles Bryant would have to answer for a long list of items the prosecution had collected, including that giant zip tie, the shovel he purchased the night Jackie died, and that large knife which police believe he used to cut up her body, all found at his house.
This is something that you pray every night does not happen to your child when they go off to school.
Investigators had also found a stun gun in his car with Jackie's DNA on it. But it appears Jackie was spared at least one horror. Prosecutors Anna Hernandez and Lucas Allen say the medical examiner was able to run tests on Jackie's remains and found no evidence of sexual assault.
There was zero evidence to support that they had any type of sexual encounter.
Prosecutors say this undermines Bryant's story that this was kinky sex gone wrong. His attorney, Glynis McGinty.
How could they have had sex if there's no evidence?
No evidence to the degree of no sperm found in her. That doesn't mean they didn't have some type of consensual sexual encounter.
She likes it when we're making out.
Prosecutors chose not to play that interrogation tape for the jury, which meant Bryant would have to take the stand if he wanted jurors to hear his version of events. He elected not to.
Shouldn't he be explaining to the jury why he's not at fault for her death?
And then that flies in the face of our constitutional rights.
But the defense knows it has an uphill battle to convince a jury that Bryant is not guilty of murder while admitting he disposed of Jackie's body.
If he says it was just an accident, why didn't he call for help?
Sure, fair question. Intoxicated, panicked, and his mind would not process all of that to make a rational decision that you or I would have made, call the police.
But Bryant went further than simply discarding Jackie's body. Much, much further. And prosecutors wanted the jury to hear their theory.
A huge piece of that story was the stalking.
But before the jury could hear from Caitlin, the judge would have to rule on whether or not to allow this evidence.
How is he his boyfriend?
Local TV cameras were there when, without the jury present, Caitlin took the stand and faced her ex.
I was disgusted just to see his face.
Did he look at you? Did you meet eyes?
At one point we had to, when they made me describe to the court what he was wearing. And he just had this smirk on his face.
There's nothing really that can prepare you for that, is there?
No. The second I walked out those doors, I started bawling.
In the end, the judge ruled against Caitlin being able to tell her story to the jury.
It was definitely a real blow to us.
That was the right decision.
Why?
He had not been convicted of anything with Caitlin.
As the jury went out to deliberate, the defense was hopeful.
I don't believe that they could prove that he murdered her. I don't think that they proved that.
But would the jury agree? They were out for a little over 2 hours, and even without hearing Caitlin's story,
We, the jury, find the defendant, Charles Dean Bryant, Jr., guilty of the offense of murder.
Charles Bryant was found guilty of Jackie Vandagriff's murder and dismemberment.
To your way of thinking, was justice done?
Yes.
I knew she was up there and said, "Thank you."
Because prosecutors had no evidence Bryant committed another crime at the same time as Jackie's murder, like rape or kidnapping, he was not eligible for the death penalty. He was sentenced to life.
As terrible as it is to say, but I wanted the death penalty.
Under Texas law, Bryant could be eligible for parole after 30 years. Caitlin says she feels like she's still looking over her shoulder and always will be.
I fear that when he gets out, he'll come and find me and do something to either me or someone that I love. That's my biggest fear.
Ever since this happened, Caitlin and her mother have been thinking about Jackie and her family.
This whole time I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how they felt.
Nearly 2 years after Jackie died, they finally met.
Her grandmother, bless her heart, she immediately came up to us and to Caitlin and hugged her and said, "I've been so worried about you these past 2 years."
Wow. Karen, why is this the part that gets you?
He took away their little girl. And the pain I saw in their eyes, I could feel their pain.
And yet the grandmother was telling Caitlin she was worried about Caitlin.
Yes,
You sound like very special people.
they are.
Caitlin says she struggled with the fact that she survived and Jackie did not. This so easily could have been you.
And some days I wish it was. It's just the guilt that eats me up sometimes. I would have easily taken her place if I had the chance.
Jackie Vandagriff's family has endowed an internship in health and wellness at Texas Women's University in her name.
A young mother murdered.
There was only one suspect in this case.
Who else would want this sweet young lady murdered?
Decades later, the prime suspect arrested, but a witness changes everything.
I kept the secret for 30 years.
48 Hours, Saturday at 10/9 Central on CBS.
For anyone who knows Carmen, there's just a magic to her. She was going through this transition, ending her marriage. There was just no question that we were meant to spend the rest of our lives together. Hadn't heard from her that day. Left a couple messages.
Hey, darling, how you doing today? And really concerned. I left a couple of messages for you, and please give me a call just to let me know you're okay.
Got panicky. I knew something just wasn't right. And finally called the police.
There was quite a struggle. A heck of a fight had gone on in that room. Furniture was turned over, potted plants were knocked over. There was blood everywhere. Ceiling, walls, the carpet was blood-stained everywhere.
I think it was fairly clear to us that a murder had occurred.
I knew from the time I had children that the worst thing that would ever happen, that could ever happen to me, would be to lose a child. And in this case, she was just ripped out of our lives.
Somebody had to have a motive for this to happen. I only know one person that had anything to gain, Tom, my ex-son-in-law, an English professor. But he couldn't do that. He doesn't have the guts.
I told Mr. Murray that his ex-wife Carmen had died and that we needed to speak to him about that.
In me, you have not just a likely suspect, but a convenient one.
Why didn't you just arrest him then and there?
We couldn't prove that he had done it.
If this scenario falls apart, you're very well back to square one.
We didn't have a lot of physical evidence.
We never found any bloody clothing. We never found a murder weapon. We were going to have a tough road ahead of us.
I began to think about all the things that I did wrong. I didn't spend enough time with her. I didn't call her often enough. The fact that someone took her life away, it was important to me that there would be some justice. This crime will be solved. I'll spend every damn penny I've got.
A mind
for murder.
You don't meet many people in your life like my daughter. So caring about everybody and almost everything.
When they talk about Carmen, the oldest of their 4 daughters,
That's Carmen.
Danny and Judy Ross are never at a loss for words.
She's bubbly. She's fun to be around. She makes the room warm. She's the sunshine.
Judy even put together a list of words that come to her mind when she thinks of Carmen.
Brilliant, empathetic, thoughtful, spiritual, patient, political, loving, peaceful, delightful, silly, playful, courageous, full of life, daughter of our youth.
And Carmen's 1985 wedding to her sweetheart, Tom Murray, was one of the best days Danny and Judy ever had.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Both of them wrote their wedding vows. I stood there and cried through the whole thing.
Was your husband the only one crying that day?
No, there were some others.
That was a happy day.
Absolutely.
Carmen met Tom at Ohio State University, but it wasn't a typical college romance. She was a junior, he was her English professor.
Well, I was hesitant because I didn't know why a professor would be interested in one of his students. And is he married, and how do you know?
These are questions I've heard parents ask in the past.
Well, sure.
Absolutely.
Well, sure.
Absolutely.
Tom Murray was only 27, a first-year professor, and once she met him, Judy was impressed.
He was very easy to talk to, very proper, good manners, you know, everything.
Did you like him?
Absolutely.
Did you love him?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Carmen's 3 little sisters, Samantha, Heather, and April, who never had a brother, were delighted to at last have a brother-in-law.
It was family.
It was
you know,
our
we'd
family.
hang out, we'd have Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner and laugh and tell stories.
Right after they got married, they came over every Sunday after church and we had Sunday dinner together.
He was attending church with us. He didn't drink excessively. He didn't smoke. He exercised.
This is something that the 2 of us created together.
He was polite all the time around everyone.
2 out of 3 children were nestled, each snug in her bed. Heather had fallen asleep on the stairway again, and April had to be gagged, tied, and bodily carried up to her room.
And I said, Tom, you're too good to be true.
In 1988, after Carmen graduated from law school, the couple moved to Manhattan, Kansas, where Tom took a job teaching linguistics at Kansas State University. His colleague, Lyman Baker, says Murray made an immediate impression.
A very gentle guy. He had a very sharp mind, personable, reasonable, good listener, serious, did his work. You know, I always got the impression from people that they really appreciated having a man like that to work with.
And despite the fact that his specialty, linguistics, can be a little tedious, Tom Murray managed to make it almost exciting.
He was a great teacher.
There seemed to be something very gentle and at the same time very endearing and caring.
Never came with any notes or anything. He would just come in, sit on the desk just like we are, and deliver his lesson. And I thought that was pretty, admirable because he knew everything about the subject.
But while Tom Murray was on the academic fast track, Carmen was struggling to find her place in the world. She gave up law after just a few years, and instead, hoping to change people's lives in less confrontational ways, she became a mediator.
She would always say she was a recovering attorney. And
She wanted to help people though, so she decided to mediate because she thought she could help them come to, a solution without having to go through all that.
But Tom and Carmen were searching for a solution to their own problem. They could not decide whether to have a child.
When they first got married, they were going to have children. Tom wanted a bunch. Then they were married for 13 years, and now Tom doesn't want any children. And she's now changed careers, and now she wants children.
In 1998, despite the disagreement, Carmen became pregnant, and that December, she gave birth to a daughter, Kiara.
He was angry, I think, with Carmen being pregnant and never treated her the same after that. I think he punished her.
Carmen stopped working. She loved being a mother, but felt she was raising Kiara alone. And Tom's indifference to the baby led Carmen to question other parts of her life.
She felt as if she was living a life that just didn't fit very well with how she felt about things and how she believed.
Angela Hayes, Carmen's best friend.
It sounds cliche, but she wanted so much to help people. And she felt as if she wasn't able to do that in the way that her life was playing out.
Carmen was about to make a momentous decision. When Kiara was still a toddler, Carmen changed careers again and became a healer.
She was in an apprentice program where she was physically doing treatment of people in the local area. And a lot of people made fun of it because they didn't understand it, perhaps even her husband.
Carmen was practicing consegrity, a spiritual approach to medicine that claims to teach the body to heal itself. In September 2002, she went to a consegrity conference in Wichita, and that's where she met Larry Lima.
She came home and said, have you ever looked into somebody's eyes and just felt like, you know, you were soulmates, just like that?
The conventional thinking is that's the way you're supposed to feel about your husband.
True, and I think she did up until maybe that day.
How did she change when she met Larry Lima?
She was Carmen again.
Smiled and
she had the sparkle back in her eyes.
She was like almost too happy. I was like, why are you this happy? I mean, what?
Larry Lima was a social worker living in San Diego. Shortly after they met, the couple began an affair.
Are you upset about the relationship that she was in?
It bothered me, it hurt me, because she was acting in ways that a lot of people in the world act who don't have respect for their spouse and just are out living for their own self-gratification.
But after years of living what Carmen considered an unfulfilled life, her friends thought change was good for her.
She was extremely happy, and not only had I never seen her that happy, I've never seen anybody that happy. She felt that her life was unfolding as she'd always wanted her life to be.
And it wasn't long before Carmen decided she wanted to divorce Tom Murray.
She tried to get him to go to counseling. She tried to make it work. And she eventually just said, it isn't going to work.
But the trouble was only just beginning, because Carmen had not only decided to leave Tom, she decided to take their daughter with her.
How does a peace-loving mediator type person react to a nasty custody battle?
She described it to us that her mama bear claws are going to have to come out.
She's like the morning light in a very dark night.
Larry Lima still remembers the first time Carmen Ross caught his eye.
We met at a workshop in Wichita, Kansas. She had this plate, and I walked by, and she, just very kindly asked if I wanted a piece of watermelon. And I grabbed a watermelon seed and ate it and walked away. She just kind of raised her eyebrows and said afterwards that she knew, that was the moment.
Larry lives in San Diego, and by the fall of 2002, Carmen was flying to see him as often as possible. She confided to Larry that her marriage to Tom Murray was ending.
Something had kind of died inside. She had worked very hard and been unhappy for a very, very long time.
In her marriage?
In her marriage, yeah.
In June 2003, after Murray grudgingly agreed to divorce Carmen, she began making plans to move to California. But even though Tom Murray didn't want children at first, he now was not about to let go of their daughter, Kiara.
We had hoped to work out, some sort of an agreement that would be best for Kiara to go back and forth. It just clearly wasn't going to be feasible.
Did she want him in her life?
Absolutely.
In Kiara's life?
Absolutely. So did I. And I know how important it is for a child to be with both parents as much as possible.
So Carmen left Manhattan and moved here to Lawrence, Kansas, about 90 minutes away from Tom. Larry Lima was now planning to move here and join her. Carmen and Tom were temporarily sharing custody of Kiara, but working with a mediator to negotiate a permanent settlement. Carmen was determined to work things out.
She didn't want to hurt him. Even though she was leaving him, she still wanted to be friends with him.
She really believed that in some point in time they would become friends again.
But while Carmen was trying to bridge their differences, Tom was busy burning bridges.
Clearly he was angry and certainly sent emails and phone calls that upset her.
Were you surprised that he was putting up such a fight on the custody issue?
Oh, no.
No
way.
Because
No,
that's
no,
all
no.
he has left.
But also he wanted to win. He's a winner.
But this time, Carmen was determined to win. On November 11th, 2003, she arrived at the mediation session and put her foot down.
She told Tom that she wanted Kara to live with her, and then I was moving there.
And how was she emotionally at that point?
I think that in the midst of feeling anxious and a bit afraid, that there was also a sense of relief.
Because she had done it.
She had done it, yeah. But she was clearly saddened and afraid of how it was going to turn out.
By the next night, when Larry called from San Diego, Carmen was feeling better.
We spoke for hours that Wednesday night, and I thought that she was in a fairly good place. I mean, that we were going to get through this.
As it turned out, that was the last conversation they ever had.
I didn't hear from her that next morning. I knew something was wrong.
On Friday afternoon, Larry frantically called the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. Detective Doug Woods went to Carmen's house to investigate, and when he got there, it was almost too much, even for him.
Blood on the floor, blood on the walls, blood on the ceiling. Furniture had been turned over, potted plants and stuff were broken against the fireplace. There was a great degree of brutality, I think, that went on in this house.
And in the middle of the room, Carmen Ross lay dead, beaten and stabbed to death at the age of 40.
I remember sensing that this is just not true.
Carmen's house was now a crime scene, one that promised a wealth of physical evidence. As crime scene investigators combed the house for clues, Detective Woods drove to Manhattan to tell Tom Murray his ex-wife was dead.
Mr. Murray came to the door, opened the door. I told Mr. Murray that his ex-wife Carmen had died and that we needed to speak to him about that.
What did he say?
Mr. Murray asked me if we had to do it right now.
He said, do we have to do this now? And you said?
I said it would be best if we could do this right now.
So Murray agreed to go with Woods to a nearby police station.
Did you have to convince him to talk?
No, sir.
To the extent that I'm helping and you are solving the case, I'm tickled to death to participate.
He was free to go.
But I'm not holding you here against your will.
No.
Okay, you're here of your own free will and you're agreeing to stay in.
You don't have to keep repeating that stuff. You haven't been mean to me and you're not holding me against my will.
Okay.
In fact, it turned out the professor couldn't stop talking.
Well, let me ask you this.
He sat with Detective Woods and others from 8:30 that night until 6 o'clock the next morning without a lawyer.
When this interrogation began, all you had said to Professor Murray is that his ex-wife had died.
Yes, sir.
Did he want to know what had happened?
He never asked me how she died.
If I were you, I'd be looking at me. I think you should.
So, in my mind then, tell me what a great guy you are, why I shouldn't be pointing the finger at you a little bit right now.
You don't know me. I'm sort of the original Boy Scout. I mean, I've always been the straightest arrow in the quiver.
He could explain away everything that we would bring at him. I think he thought he was smarter than we were.
I had bought a fresh pineapple and was cutting it apart and sliced into my hand there.
Murray's right hand had small cuts, and both his wrists were bruised.
And they all happened in the last 2 or 3 days.
And Murray vehemently denied killing Carmen.
I never wanted Carmen dead. I wanted her reasonable.
You have some kind of strategy in mind when you're talking to him?
Basically locking him into his story, then we can start disproving some of the things he says. Mr. Murray, however, though, would change his story periodically.
You're going to look at this with a raised eyebrow. I did go out and drive around a bit, but I did not drive to Lawrence. I didn't tell you that before.
It was a cat and mouse game.
Will you be here sort of looking over my shoulder?
Yeah, I'm going to leave you alone.
That went on all night long.
No, there's no such thing as the perfect crime. You're going to get caught. The bad guy always gets caught.
But if Murray was the bad guy, he wasn't getting caught tonight.
So at this point, you don't have compelling evidence.
You're not gonna, Tom, get us to sit here and tell you about our case, okay?
I don't want you to tell me about the case, but I'm concluding that because if you had compelling evidence, will you just go ahead and arrest me?
At 6 a.m., Tom Murray went home.
I was upset with myself because I didn't push the right button or ask the right questions or go in the right direction to get him to confess.
Murray talked so much, he was now their #1 suspect, but police had nothing against him except a lot of talk. They waited for evidence from the crime scene and finally found nothing.
We never found any bloody clothing. We never found a murder weapon. It just didn't exist.
Tom Murray continued to teach and to raise Kiara over the following months. Danny Ross feared the murder would never be solved, though he was growing suspicious of the son-in-law he once loved.
How do you come to terms with that?
Don't have an answer for that, because if I had thought he had actually killed my daughter, I would have hurt him right then, badly.
Nearly 1 year after Carmen Ross was murdered in November 2003.
We'd run the gamut of this case. We weren't going to find any more evidence.
Police still had not arrested anyone. Then, in October 2004, detectives Doug Woods, Pat Pollack, and Lyle Hagenbush decided they would have to take a chance on a circumstantial case. They arrested their #1 suspect, Professor Tom Murray.
I thought we had a good case.
Not great?
Not great, because we didn't have a lot of physical evidence.
It was very hard for Carmen's sisters, Samantha, Heather, and April, to believe the charges.
You don't want somebody that you loved, that you gave Christmas presents to, that you hugged and said you loved, you don't want them to be the person who could have done that.
Things were about to get tougher for the Rosses. Just 3 months before Murray's trial began, the district attorney in Lawrence was voted out of office, leaving this case in the hands of Angela Wilson, an assistant DA. Trouble was, she'd never prosecuted a murder before.
I've handled a number of rape cases and attempted murder case, but this is by far the most involved.
But Kansas has an unusual law that allows victims to pay for a special prosecutor to help the district attorney's office. So the Ross family hired Tom Bath, a noted defense attorney, to be part of the prosecution team.
I'm assistant counsel, which means it's really up to them to decide what role, if any, I have. In this case, they've allowed me to be a full team member.
Murray has hired 2 of the state's best attorneys, Pedro Irigoyengaray and Bob I.
I think our best card is the evidence, or the lack thereof.
Morning, Danny. How you doing?
In February 2005, the Rosses came to Lawrence determined to win 2 things.
All right.
A guilty verdict.
It's the state of Kansas versus Thomas E. Murray, 2004.
And custody of Carmen and Tom's daughter, Kiara, who'd been living with them since Tom's arrest.
On November 13th of 2003, Thomas Murray, a precise, articulate college professor, bludgeoned his former wife to death in the living room of her home.
As Angela Wilson begins the biggest trial of her career, she's a little nervous.
A few months before Carmen's death, she moved into her own apartment in Manhattan. That afternoon at 12:45, and it would be nearly 24 hours, or over 24 hours, before anybody would know she was dead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense attorney Bob I is eager to exploit the weaknesses of Angela Wilson's case.
All they had was a hunch, and a hunch is all they have today.
It's an emotional day for everyone.
This is a photograph of Carmen when she was alive, when she was the person.
Even for the normally stoic Tom Murray. After investigating for more than a year, the best piece of evidence against Murray is still the first piece, his 10-hour videotaped interview with the police.
I'm going to go ahead and step out. These folks from Douglas County will go ahead.
Investigators asked Murray about the day of Carmen's murder.
And Thursday morning, did you drive to Lawrence?
No, I drove home and I graded my midterms.
Murray was seen at 8:30 a.m. when he dropped his daughter off at the babysitter's and again around noon when he got her back. No one saw him in between, and detectives believe that's when he drove 90 miles to Lawrence to kill Carmen.
In my mind, I can't get there and back inside of the time I have available.
But Detective Lyle Hagenbush says Murray could. Hagenbush knows because he did it.
We were able to show that Tom Murray could drive from Manhattan to Lawrence and have plenty of time to kill Carmen Ross and return to Manhattan.
Detectives don't think it would have taken long for Murray to kill Carmen. They think he beat her first, then stabbed Carmen with a knife he got from her kitchen.
I didn't do it. I mean, I'll sit here and say this until I'm blue in the face. You can choose to believe me or not. All I can do is tell you the truth.
There are times when Murray appears genuinely upset. And times when he's not.
You are a very skilled interviewer, Pat. You've been trained very well. You too, Doug. I mean, you're good at what you guys do.
You knew during the time that... When the defense finally gets a chance to speak, Pedro Irigoyengaray says even though it lasted almost 10 hours, Tom Murray's statement proves nothing.
Have you found one bit of conclusive proof that Mr. Murray was at Carmen Ross's house on the 13th of November?
I'm not aware of any.
In fact, the state's own forensic experts, who prosecutors hope will link Murray to the crime, actually helped the defense team make its case.
There were 54 or 55 samples tested from Miss Ross's home, and in none of those, Mr. Murray's DNA was found, correct?
Correct. There's no DNA, and there's only one fingerprint matching Tom Murray.
The only fingerprint that was found of Thomas Murray's was on a brown dropper bottle.
Yes,
And no prints of his were found anywhere else.
that is correct.
It is true, is it not?
Then the defense says the evidence suggests there was more than one person at the crime scene. Police found what looked like 2 bloody shoe prints.
Neither of those 2 shoe prints matched anything, to your knowledge, belonging to Mr. Murray.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Faced with a lack of forensic evidence, the prosecution argues Murray is the only person with a motive to kill Carmen. They believe he exploded after a mediation session just 2 days before the murder.
It was apparent to her that they were going to have to go into a custody battle.
And prosecutors say Tom Murray had another motive, the oldest one in the book, jealousy, because Carmen's fiancé, Larry Lima, was about to move to Lawrence.
Were you in love with her?
Passionately.
When were you planning to move to Lawrence?
First part of December.
You familiar with that exhibit? Can you point for the jury the location where you would have gone into the house?
As the state methodically works through 4 weeks of testimony,
He seemed disheveled, he seemed tired.
the trial is long.
Were you able to determine the number of stab wounds here in this neck area?
That would be 13.
And at times difficult.
This is a tear of the tissue that's been caused by a crush of the tissue between a hard object and the bone underneath.
It's a numb feeling because as I sit there and I saw all the pictures, it makes me think thoughts that I don't think a human being should have to think.
Prosecutors say Murray carefully planned Carmen's murder and cleaned up afterwards. And they're about to present some startling evidence explaining how an English professor could possibly know so much about murder.
These are the computers that were taken from Mr. Murray.
The search term was how to murder someone and not get caught.
After weeks of testimony, Professor Thomas Murray's attorneys say things are going their way.
The physical evidence that they've presented has, by and large, shown exactly what we thought it would, and that is that Tom Murray was not at the scene of this crime.
That's just what Danny Ross is worried about.
If in fact the worst case happens and he is acquitted, then the jury is going to put him back with my granddaughter.
Yes.
3 generations of Rosses from 5 different states have moved to Lawrence, Kansas
Hand me the remote.
for the duration of the trial.
Detectives were unable to find any evidence during...
But the routine is becoming a grind.
It's really hard to sit there patiently and let them do their job. And it concerns me, is he going to get the justice that he really deserves?
There's good reason for the Rosses to be nervous.
And I think, Carmen, that is a lie.
The prosecutors started out strongly, playing Tom Murray's revealing police interview.
All right.
But now Assistant DA Angela Wilson is having a tough time trying her first murder.
What was the quantity of blood involved in that case?
Objection, Your Honor. That's not relevant.
On a case of this magnitude, it has been overwhelming at times.
Questions about websites.
But things are starting to look up for the prosecution and the Rosses. The jury is about to hear the most powerful forensic evidence yet, and it's got nothing to do with blood or DNA.
Have you ever gotten on the internet and looked up any websites that have to do with crime scenes or polygraphs? Oh, I got onto the CSI website, occasionally have fantasies about trying to make it as a freelance writer.
Investigators could not have imagined what they'd discover when they confiscated Murray's computers. It turns out the professor was not just researching linguistics, although there is a word for the kind of searches he was doing online. Suspicious, maybe even damning.
Robert Dean Brown.
Dean Brown is a forensic computer expert. He dug around in the recesses of Murray's computers.
11:25 a.m., the search for, on Yahoo, quotes, murder for hire.
Just a few seconds later, is there another search done?
Yes, ma'am. There's a search for how to hire an assassin.
Did you find anything shortly more than an hour later?
And there was a search for how to make a bomb.
It's beginning to sound like a prosecutor's dream.
It shows Yahoo search for how to murder someone and not get caught.
Investigators were thrilled with the secrets Murray's computers revealed, especially when they learned the searches were conducted just as the custody battle Tom and Carmen were having was getting nasty.
When you have somebody searching numerous times for this kind of topic and then somebody winds up dead, it's kind of a clue.
You're hoping in part to hoist this guy on his own hard drive.
Sure. Yes.
Can you do it?
The evidence is there.
But the defense has an explanation.
The next page shows a site visit on the 10th of November to something called twiztv.com/scripts/CSI.
Mr. Murray was interested in the possibility of writing an episode for a CSI-type program.
Is your best explanation of these internet searches that they're just an unfortunate coincidence?
What would you like for us to do, invent something? I mean, a trial lawyer works with what he or she has to work with.
The computers offer up more bad news for Professor Murray. Emails that show his anger with Carmen was growing.
And even more pissed at her for beginning an intimate relationship with another man, and even more pissed at her for continuing that relationship through all the months that she and I were supposed to be making an effort at working things out. But I can't just sit back and have my daughter taken away from me. I'm increasingly coming to feel like an animal that's being backed into a corner.
The state is rested.
The prosecution rests. Tom Murray's defense will make 3 main points. First, a custody attorney told Murray he had no reason to fear that Carmen would take Kiara away.
If one parent wants to leave the state of Kansas, fine, but they don't take the child with them.
Next, the defense argues even though Murray expressed his anger in emails, he was still committed to working with Carmen. And that's according to the mediator herself, Nancy Hughes.
They worked well together. It was pretty clear that they were trying to support each other in taking care of their daughter.
And finally, the defense argues not only is there no evidence Professor Murray was even at the crime scene, there's a mystery bloodstain on Carmen's sink, suggesting someone else was at Carmen's house. Defense expert Robert Tressel.
Would you please describe for the jury what that stain represents to you?
What we call a pattern blood stain transfer.
Do you have an opinion as to what could have caused that particular stain on that pedestal sink?
My impression is this is a tennis shoe print.
If it is a shoe print, the defense says it's not Murray's.
Can we get copies of your notes, please?
But Angela Wilson has hit her stride and hits back, attacking the expert's expertise.
You don't have any certifications in the area of blood stain analysis, do you?
Certifications.
I'm sorry, sir, but that's a question that just requires a yes or no answer. So if you could please answer my question, the one that I'm asking. You don't have any certifications in the area of blood stain pattern analysis, do you?
No, I do not.
I felt I could see Angela just get a little more confident as the trial went along. I think she did a superb job.
Look at the knife. Look at the edge.
And she saved a little drama for her closing argument.
This is a person who was bent on murder 13 times. He slammed that knife into her neck.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Tom Murray never takes the stand. The defense pins its hopes on reasonable doubt, and they argue there is plenty of it.
Carl, let's go back to the crime scene. There's none of his blood there, none of his fingerprints, none of his footprints. No one sees his car there. No one. Nor any scientific test can put Tom Murray on that house on the 13th.
For the Ross family, this is now one of the hardest parts of the trial, waiting for the jury to decide.
I recognize that the jury could find him innocent. And if he is found innocent, then my heart will be broken again, because we'll have to give our granddaughter to him. I'm past being hurt. I'm just very angry at what this man did to my daughter.
It's been nearly a year and a half since Danny Ross's daughter Carmen was murdered.
He has now taken her away from us, so I never get a chance to hug her ever again.
There's no doubt in the Rosses' minds about who killed Carmen, but the fate of the accused murderer, her ex-husband Tom Murray, now rests with the jury.
It's putting the case in the hands of 12 people that don't know everything that we know. They get to make the decision, and that's very tough.
I have looked over at him still sitting there, and I watch him, and I'm like, I loved you.
There's no wiggle room for the jurors. They either have to convict Murray of first-degree murder or set him free.
Everything is on the table as we speak, right over there.
Murray's attorneys repeatedly argued that...
But Murray's life is not the only one at stake.
Ross and Murray shared custody of...
If he's acquitted, the Rosses would have to give him Kiara, the daughter he had with Carmen. It's the worst-case scenario the Rosses hope they'll never face.
My daughter was killed, and we can't bring her back. But having my granddaughter raised in a proper environment is what my daughter would have wanted, and that's the most important thing to our family.
All rise.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this
It took 5 weeks to present all the evidence, and the jury is taking its time, going through it all.
I believe he's guilty, and I believe he's going to be found guilty.
After 3 days of deliberations, there's a verdict. It is St. Patrick's Day, and the professor appears relaxed, reading a book on the Polish language, even as he waits for the jury to come back.
All rise.
State of Kansas versus Thomas E. Murray. Verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant Thomas E. Murray guilty of murder in the first degree.
Murray is one of the few people in the courtroom who contains himself. Carmen's family is overwhelmed.
You've gotten the outcome that you wanted. What does justice feel like?
Thank God. For so long it has been all about
this process coming to an end today, imagining this day, and that we have Kiara, she's safe. Now I can really mourn for Carmen.
It is also an emotional victory for the prosecutors, especially Angela Wilson, who began this trial as a rookie against seasoned defense attorneys and won big.
I think this is the first time I've ever seen a prosecutor cry at a verdict.
When it was a good one?
Yeah.
There was just so much emotion around this case and around the family, and it has been very good to be included in the family fold. I think I joked early on that I was an honorary Ross girl.
Carmen's family and her fiancé have the verdict they want, and they know it's now time to move on.
I'm convinced that this is a domestic violence-related homicide.
Larry remembers Carmen by volunteering with domestic violence victims at the Family Justice Center in San Diego.
Every victim that comes in here, it's like, okay, Carmen, you know, how do we go about making this person's life a little less traumatic?
It will be a little harder for the Rosses, who once considered Murray a son and a brother.
This guy was part of your life.
Absolutely. And it is a very confusing, conflicting feeling, because I have no doubt that it were his hands that hurt her. But I don't know what happened to his head. To come to realize that someone that you love took away someone that you love. How am I supposed to explain that to my kids when I don't get it? And his daughter.
There'll be no explanations from Tom Murray, who remained defiant at his sentencing.
I remain nonplussed that the jury believed the prosecution's fairy tale of my involvement in Carmen Ross's death.
He insisted he was innocent and refused to apologize.
I have never raised my hand in anger against anyone. Not ever. Much less against the woman with whom I created a child.
And in a rare display of emotion,
dear Kiara,
he saved his last words for his daughter.
Since I can't be with you, I'm very glad you're able to live with people who love you so much.
Kiara, who is now 9, lives with the Rosses at home in Indiana.
I asked her, I said, "Are you worried about who's going to take care of you?" And she looked at me like this and she said, "No, I'm glad I have my family to take care of me." And she's got an entire family that adores her and would do anything for her. And we'll take care of her. Together, we will take care of her.